Okay, shalom everyone. Today is December the 12th, 2022, Monday. We're talking about Parashat Vayeshev. I always like to say this is the best Parsha in the entire Torah. This is my Bar Mitzvah Parsha. Um, this is really such an incredibly rich Parsha. Just from 30,000 feet, this is the first of the last four Parshiyot in the book of Breshit. These four parshiot are the stories of Joseph, which round out the story of Jacob, which round out the stories of Breshit. So you can see nested within Genesis is the Jacob story, and nested within the Jacob story is the Joseph story. And nested within the Joseph story are several stories that make up that story. And it's not an accident that this story has captivated the imagination of so many people and writers and imaginative playwrights and Andrew Lloyd Webber and all of that. And we can be so immersed in this story. I happened to when I was in Israel last year, I purchased this book. It's a whole book on the stories, and in my library I have other entire volumes on just Joseph's story. There's a book out from Jewish Publication Society last year, a couple of years ago. At any rate, I want
Rabbi, what's the subtitle of that book that you held up?
Sipurim al Shel Chalamot. Sipuram Shel Chalamot. It's Yosef Grossman. Okay. I want to focus on the last story in this parsha, namely the story where Joseph is in jail with the wine steward and the baker, or the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, Sar HaOfim, Sar HaMashkim, Sar HaMashkim, Sar HaOfim. I want to do that, with the assumption that we're familiar with the stories that lead up to it. Joseph is, the dreamer, dreams of lording over his brothers. The brothers are angry. They throw him into a pit. They sell him as a slave. And when he is down in Egypt, he is in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife makes advances at him. He rebuffs them, and then she frames him. And because he is framed, he is sent to jail. It's in jail that he encounters these two characters. And woven through the story are dreams, interpretation of dreams, and really we could spend the entire year talking about these parshiot. But I want to focus on the last chapter 40. So here we go. We're going to read the story and see what we can make of it. And I have some selected themes in this story, and see if they resonate with us. I hope they do. If not, by the end of the week on Shabbat, I'll have some new themes, I'm sure. So here we go. Let's take a look at Joseph in jail. Okay, we got it?
Yeah.
Good. Joseph in jail. So, Vayihi. Now, after these events, it was that the cupbearer and the baker of the king fell afoul of their lord, the king of Egypt. Mashke melech Mitzrayim ba'ofeh, chatu mashke melech Mitzrayim ba'ofeh ladonehem lemelech Mitzrayim. Chatu is the word it says, and he translated this as Everett Fox translation, fell afoul. Chatu means they sinned, okay? Vayiksof paro al shnei sarisav al sar hamashkim ve'al sar haofim. Pharaoh became infuriated with his two officials, with the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. And he placed them in custody in the house of the chief of the guard in the dungeon house, in the place where Yosef was imprisoned. Okay, so paying attention, and of course we could analyze the use of language and the cadence, etc. I'm not going to focus too much on that. He's in jail. And they are placed by Pharaoh in jail, the same jail that Joseph is imprisoned in. The chief of the guard appointed Yosef for them. Yosef itam, vayisharet otam, that he should wait upon them. Vayu yamin b'mishmar. They were in custody for many days. How many? We don't know. And now, vayachalmu. And then the two of them dreamt a dream. Chalom shnehem. Each man his own dream. Ish chalamo balayla echad. Each man his own dream in a single night. Ish kipitron chalamo. Each man according to his dream's interpretation. The cupbearer and the baker, Hamashkeva Alfe, Asher Lamelech Mitzrayim, Asher Asurim Beveit HaSoar, who were imprisoned in the dungeon house. Okay, so they had a dream. Joseph came to them in the morning and saw them, Vihinam, Zoafim. And here, they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials, who were with him in custody, in the house of his Lord, saying, why are your faces in such ill humor today? Madua pnechem ra'im hayom. They said to him, Chalom chalamnu, we dreamed a dream. Ufoter enoto, and there is no interpreter for it. Vayomer alehem Yosef, Joseph said to him, Halo le'Elohim pitronim, sapruna ali. Interpretations are not interpretations from God. Pray, recount them to me. We could stop there and talk all about that, but going on. The chief cupbearer recounted his dream to Joseph. He said to him, Bachalomi, in my dream. Now here a vine was in front of me. And on the vine, 3 winding tendrils. And just as it was budding, the blossom came up, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I picked the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup and put the cup in Pharaoh's palm. Yosef said to him, Zepitrono, this is its interpretation. The 3 windings are 3 days. In another 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, so that you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand according to the former practice, when you were his cupbearer. Keep me in mind with you. When it goes well for you, pray, deal in loyalty with me, and call me to mind to Pharaoh, so that you have me brought out of this house. For I was stolen, yes, stolen from the land of the Hebrews. And here too I have done nothing, that they should have put me in the pit. The chief baker saw that he interpreted it for good. So he said to Joseph, I too in my dream, now here 3 baskets of white bread were on my head. And in the uppermost basket, all sorts of edibles for Pharaoh, baker's work. And the birds were eating them from the basket, from off my head. Yosef gave an answer, and he said, this is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In another 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from off you. He will hang you on a tree. The birds will eat your flesh from off you. And thus it was, on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a great drink fest for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the cupbearer and the head of the chief baker amidst his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his cupbearership, so that he put the cup in Pharaoh's palm. But the chief baker he hanged, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. But the chief cupbearer did not keep Joseph in mind, and he forgot him. V'lo zachar Sarah mashkim et Yosef vayishkachehu. I want to just close the screen for just kind of breathe, take a sigh, and I'm gonna a little slowness in my computer, but it's such a powerful story. It's there's so much going on in the story, and you have Joseph. We he's just a teen, a little more of a teen here. Maybe he's 18 or 19 years old. He was 17 when the brothers sold them. So this is shortly after that. He's in jail. We know that he has already shown tremendous distinction as a servant. He's got prodigious talent. And the place where he is serving, the home of the Sarat Tabachim, Potiphar, it's quite likely that this same Sarat Tabachim is the same chief of the dungeon. Okay, it's not exactly clear in the text, but there seems to be a sense of we have found an interesting person and a prodigiously talented person, so we just can't get rid of him. And this is the first theme that I want to. I'm going to just go to a couple of things to break down the story, and then I'm going to I want to share some selected themes here because it's impossible, obviously, to do the whole death. So in the story we have the setting. It's the jail setting from the previous chapter when Joseph's Lord took him and put him in the dungeon house. Vayikach Adonai Yosef oto vayitneo el bea sohar, the place where the king's prisoners are imprisoned. So this is a kind of deluxe prison, I guess you could say. And second than that, but while he was there in the dungeon house, God was with Joseph and extended kindness to him. He put his favor in the eyes of the dungeon warden. So the warden, there's a warden in the dungeon, in the jail. So that's probably a different character. Okay. And the dungeon warden put in Joseph's hands all the prisoners who were in the dungeon house. Whatever had to be done there, it was he that did it. The dungeon warden did not need to see to anything at all in his hands, since God was with him. And whatever he did, God made succeed. Okay, let's stop there. So we have this idea here that Joseph is the favorite prisoner. But Nanette, go ahead, sing.
Okay, so I can't help noticing it's like popping out at me. Maybe it doesn't matter. We don't know why the baker and the wine guy why they're in prison there. Does it even matter?
So it doesn't matter to the text. Of course, it matters to our imagination. And the rabbis, even I'll present an interpretation on that very question a little later. It doesn't matter, but I mean, part of what draws us into the story is exactly this question, which is, what did they do to deserve it, and what did they do to deserve such different outcomes? One who had his outcome in restoration, and one who had his outcome in execution. Okay, that's certainly a piece of tension here, and it creates this very dramatic tension. We are used to seeing this in, I don't know, Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, like where Joseph's in jail, and the chief, they're singing their songs, and the baker says, basically sings to him and says, interpret my dream just like him. That would be good. Go ahead, Mike.
It seems like they were in a celebrity part of the prison, that they were in a part of the prison that was reserved for people with white collar crimes. They weren't in a part of the prison with murderers and thieves. They were all celebrities.
So it's a good analogy, and it's apt in the sense that there are different kind of gradations of hell, right? And every prison system has this, and what we have here is a kind of just a little bit of a glimpse into the prison culture. And with that, I want to explore this idea that there's a favored prisoner. Okay, I think the best example of the theme of the favorite prisoner, to my mind, is in the film The Shawshank Redemption. I'm just going to put up one scene from this, okay? And of course, The Shawshank Redemption is a film that I don't know how many times you could see it. It is just a completely amazing film. This is where Dufresne is the favorite prisoner. So, I hope you can hear it. You have to hear it. I can't boost it up too much. So this is the warden. The warden has a safe in his office where he keeps all of his secret, financial dealings. Okay, if you recall the movie, Dufresne is a banker, and he does his bookkeeping for him. Okay, which is a highly unusual arrangement. It's pie. I know you can't hear. I'm sorry. So, all right. So I'm going to stop there and try and explain what's going on in the film. All right, which you might recall. So Dufresne, first of all, the film was based on a wonderful short story or novella by Stephen King, and it's worth reviewing. Dufresne's a perfect example. Stephen King's a brilliant writer, yes, and takes the theme. I'm guessing that he's borrowing the biblical theme, and the biblical theme is the person incarcerated on a frame, trumped up charges. Dufresne was framed for the murder of his wife, and after a trial, placed in jail, and he's innocent, and he's in jail for a number of years, and he is noticed by the warden for having been able to help some guards and some other in their taxes. Okay, and so the warden has some shady dealings, and he employs Dufresne as his accountant, and then in that little clip there as his personal steward. Okay, so already there, what Stephen King and what the movie is doing is playing on this archetype, which is who is enslaved to whom, and who is manipulating whom, and how is this relation? What's the anatomy of this relationship? The warden is getting services from the prisoner, and the prisoner in return is getting some privilege from the warden. The privilege that the prisoner is receiving is that he leaves his cell, probably gets some extra food, like you saw. You got a piece of pie. He gets to be aware of the outside world in a different way. He gets to observe things that are going on in the prison hierarchy. And you had in that little clip something about the governor. So there are things that are going on outside the prison that are filtering in, and that he has currency now in terms of news. And what this does on the deepest and most, richly cinematic and literary levels, is that it enables Dufresne to have this kind of influence over the rest of the prisoners, such that he is respected among the prisoners. He certainly has to earn that respect as well, but he will be the natural person to whom they bring their problems, and in that way he is a Joseph figure. I don't know if you have any reactions to that, and you want to share some of. I mean, I'm sure. I hope you've seen the film. If not, I urge you to watch. You haven't seen the film? Oh, it's really one of the best
Great.
films of the
Great
last.
film.
It's really an extraordinary film. I don't have too many favorites, but that's up there in the top 10 for me. Anybody else with any comments on that? So I want to share a different example of this, okay? And that would be here. This is a droll relationship of that theme, and today this sitcom would never be made. This is Hogan's Heroes.
I didn't know you had company. The Gestapo is not company. Frankly, I never thought much of myself. Hogan, you will show a little respect for Major Hofstadter. Just a little, sir. Respect him. Please don't twist my words.
Stand for no nonsense. I want some information.
Gosh, you mean there's something Gestapo doesn't know?
We don't know. We have Vayeshev finding out. Vayeshev are not always pleasant.
Don't make trouble for yourself, talk.
And will you stay out of this? Then sit down, please. Tell me, Colonel, what you know about the Manhattan Project. What is it?
Maybe they're selling the island back to the Indians?
104th Bomb Group was assigned as a Manhattan Project. Is that right?
Were they?
You should know. You commanded the 500th Force Bomb.
I'm going to stop it there because that's probably as much as we can take. Okay, and that it's really quite amazing how that sitcom it could never be presented today. I mean, I mean it still runs, and I'm sure you can find it streaming everywhere. But it's in such bad taste, and the time in the 60s, which was at a time when I think the relationship to the war was in the sense of the absurd, and that the histories had not been written, and certainly the Holocaust, in its depth. I mean, this is right as the Eichmann trial is emerging, and how they made this. It's really a real big puzzle, notwithstanding the fact that the archetype there again is the chief prisoner. Hogan, Colonel Hogan, functions in the Joseph role among the prisoners of war, and that is when the hierarchy of the camp, I mean, and this is the setup, when they need to convey the policies or the rules or whatever in the camp, and they need the cooperation of the prisoners. They have this individual who functions in that way. So it's a dirty game. The chief prisoner serves the hierarchy and gets privilege, serves the prisoners and gets respect, but also runs the risk of collusion or the accusation of collusion. And so therefore, it constantly has to be playing the double game. And that's why it makes for a very interesting conflict, which in the Shawshank Redemption becomes drama, and Hogan's Heroes, it's quite humorous. Okay. Any reactions to that? Do you know of any examples of? I was trying to think of other examples of the chief prisoner idea, and couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm sure there are other examples of this in literature, but there's nothing that compares to Joseph or the Shawshank Redemption by Vayeshev. But anybody have any idea? No,
Birdman of Alcatraz.
maybe, I don't know. Okay, next time you watch a prison film, keep it in mind. Okay, there is of course other examples where this dynamic is at play, and of course I am quite immersed in the literature of memoirs and Holocaust survivors, and I do tend to watch probably too much of that. Notwithstanding that, I came across a very interesting film a couple of weeks ago called Kinderblock 66, which was about the children's block at Buchenwald. The movie is about four, they're now adult survivors, well into their late 80s. The film was made in the early 2000s, I think, about 10 years ago. And they are recalling how they were saved and survived, and they survived because of their block. It wasn't a capo, but he was their block leader, and his name was Karina, I think it was. Here, let's just watch 2 seconds of this. This is the trailer of the movie.
Our stories are rarely black and white. I thought this story is a complex gray story. Political prisoners had to make a decision whom to save. And they decided we will do our best to save the children's life. And to save children's life means to save humanity. It was Kalina who put his life on the line.
Okay, that was Kalina. Kalina is a Czech. Here's him. That's him. So this is a man. His name is Kalina. It's the only known video of him. He's, this was from the 80s. He was the bloc leader. He was a political prisoner, not a Jew, a Czech communist, and he was the favored prisoner. That is to say, the person entrusted with slightly, just a little privilege, but also, was controlling a block of several dozens or maybe hundreds of young boys, adolescent boys, teen boys under his command. And the movie describes how he arranged certain, education for them and other things, and managed to shield them by disguising their identity, saying that they weren't Jewish, and in the end saved their lives.
He stood his ground and he said there are no Jews here. In 15 years, there will be no survivors anymore.
So these are the four men. They live all over the world.
Germans especially.
And they go back to Buchenwald.
Why do we remember the dark sides of our history? Because we don't want to let death have the last word.
Okay, so that's the trailer of the movie, and it's a fascinating film. It's you can okay. So and one, I'm just going to give you the article on it. This is in Times of Israel, and this is Kalina. Little known about him. Born in 1902. In 1944, the Red Army pushed the Germans out. Large number of boys, mainly between the age of 12 and 16. These boys had come from all over Europe. Kalina had risen, this is the key paragraph, Kalina had risen to a position of influence in the underground, which ran the day-to-day operations of the camp on behalf of the Nazi SS. Kalina and his fellow prisoners decided to place the youths in a special barrack far away from the main part of the Buchenwald, deep in the filthy quarantine area where the SS would loathe to go. This barrack, number 66, the little camp became known as the Kinderblock. Block elder, in his capacity, went to extraordinary lengths to ensure the survival of the boys he placed there. Unlike the other prisoners in Buchenwald, the boys of Block 66 did not have to leave the barrack for roll call, and they had access to blankets, food rations, etc. The block elders didn't beat the boys, and Kalina refused to, comply with the order, commanded the boys not to report to assembly, and they were saved. He lived after the war in obscurity, and he died. For years, however, his heroism went unrecognized, partially because Kalina, a humble man, never sought out publicity for his actions. Likewise, for years, many of the boys whom he saved didn't talk about their experiences during the Holocaust. Several years ago, some of the surviving boys, now 80 years old, along with the historian from Michigan State University, Kenneth Waltzer, initiated a process that Kalina recognized as righteous among the nations. The impetus for seeking recognition for Kalina was the filming of the documentary, which I just showed you. So he had different the people, and they showed it, and they in fact honored him as a righteous among the Gentiles. And while that's its own story, and it's riveting in all of its details, again it brings up the archetype of the favored prisoner, and it puts into sharp relief this whole idea that the prisoner serves himself, serves the hierarchy, and serves other prisoners. And it's a very, very delicate tightrope to walk on. And everyone exploits everyone else on that tightrope. And that's what's going on in the story with Joseph. Joseph, they see him as a prodigiously talented human being. And it's very, very hard for us to identify this, because we're all very good, we're very normal people, but sometimes there are people who are so exceptional, so super talented, so amazing in their talents, that they just, you can tell just by looking at them almost that they are in a different league. And Joseph is in this exemplary category. I mean, I would make the comparison. There are people who play basketball, and then there's Michael Jordan. There are people who play hockey, and then there's Bobby Orr. There are people who can pitch, and then go, on and on. And there are people who play music, and then there's, a Gould, a Glenn Gould. Lots of people can play the piano, but this is magic. And so, that doesn't come, every day. It was the luck of the draw, so to speak, that Joseph landed up where he did, and they want to exploit him for everything he's got. And he needs to exploit them for his survival. And so that maybe he will have an exit to his freedom. Nanette, go ahead.
Okay, so Rabbi, I'm totally with you. I love it. It's great. In any social situation, a hospital, a playground, you always have this hierarchy of situations. But Rabbi, let's not forget, in this Parasha, it said regarding Joseph, the Lord was with him a number of times. So yes, everything you said, yes, but just maybe he had luck on his side. The Lord, it says in the Parsha, more than twice, the Lord was with him.
I'm glad you highlighted that, because that puts into a sharp relief this question as to, where does talent come from? Where do you get this, right? And is it something? And here the Bible, in general, and these stories in specific, are all playing with this question, which is, why do things happen? Do things happen because people make choices and live with the consequences of their choices and actions? Or is there a puppeteer kind of pulling the strings here and moving the story along? Now, we read the story with both frames. We read the story with both ideas, right? In the story, everyone is making choices, and everyone suffers or experiences the consequences of the choices. And yet the narrator here is telling us, reminding us over and over that there's a hand of history. Now it's hard for us, to detach one from the other, because we use the same, we have the same thing. Look, we have the same view of life, right? In the most tragic circumstances and in the most, exalted circumstances. Let me take the most banal, which is, somebody wins the lottery, okay? Somebody wins the Powerball lottery, that last lottery, the big one was like, I don't know, $500 million. I mean, can you imagine winning $500 million and what the odds are? It's not even the odds of getting hit by lightning. It's beyond that. And yet somebody won that lottery, okay? So you would think that that's luck. Now we would all think that that's luck, but it might be and it might not be. In fact, the studies have been done about people who win lotteries that it doesn't do them any favors, okay? On the other hand, mythologically speaking, it's a luck. And then the person could say, maybe it changed my life, and maybe it was a stroke of not only serendipity, but the divine hand on this, okay? So you see, salvation and things and fortune, good fortune happening to you as a result of the divine hand. The only problem with that is the obvious, which is when misfortune happens and when, terrible things happen, you logically you would say, well, if fortune is a result of the divine hand and luck, then the other is the divine hand and bad luck, which means that people feel tremendously guilty, or they feel punished, or they feel a tremendous degree of misfortune, when in fact, how can we think about that in any way? I mean, that's why we have religion and monotheism in specific, that's the main question. The main question is not why good things happen. The main question that everyone experiences in the deepest recesses of their souls, why bad things happen and why there's suffering. And religion, in its very best, at least tries to give us the tools not to answer the unanswerable questions, but to find the mechanism to cope with the unanswerable question. None of us has the answer to the unanswerable question, but what we do have, and what I think Judaism does in a magnificent way, is it gives us the tools to cope with the misfortune and the apparent lack of justice in human suffering, especially the suffering of innocence. Okay, so we're reading the story, and the delight that we get out of the story is that we're in on the game. We are in on the idea that this is the divine plan, but it's also the result of human ingenuity and human excellence and extraordinariness. Okay, anybody else? Comments? Go ahead there, Bob.
A question: to what degree do you see the story building on themes of transformation that you have brought up in the past few weeks and in Parsha talk, whether it's transforming oneself, a family member, others, a nation, through dreams, through prophecy, and that this can occur whether you're in the pit, in the dungeon, or in Galut? And you have to be active or passive in forming interpretations and meaning.
I think that that's one of the great themes, as you have been picking up from the conversations, both in the classes and on my conversations with my colleagues. So there is a transfer. I mean, if we just dial back to last week, for example, so Jacob makes this transformation from the runaway to the successful clan leader. The question that hovers over this is, to what extent do you really transform? He was able to chart his own destiny by making his family and by with ingenuity creating his flocks. But I want to see in this year's reading of this, I want to see that there's plenty of the old Jacob in the new Jacob, that there is a transformation. I mean, certainly he has wisdom, and he has a certain sense of arrival, and the text is, tells us he is shalem, he is whole. But the critical reader in me says, is anyone ever whole? What does that mean? What does that mean to say that you are whole, you are content? And at the very moment when the text tells us that he is shalem, that's when everything unravels for him. And he becomes, both at the end of last week's Parsha with the experience of the rape of his daughter and the death of his wife, right, Rachel, and in this week's Parsha, we will see, and of course throughout, the remaining Parshiot, Jacob becomes hollowed out. He is inconsolable when brought with the bloody tunic. He does not know how to cope with this, and he is harsh. There's the harshness to him that is worthy of note. John, go ahead.
I'm just getting back to Joseph. It seems that he's a favorite wherever he is. And I think one thing that's a factor, he's just so good looking. I think this is mentioned a lot in the story, and I think it's a big factor.
So it's great that you mentioned that. There's Joseph is a handsome fellow, right? He is, and that's what attracts Potiphar's wife to him, because she is so smitten by him, and to a certain extent, there's something going on there. Meir Shalev, the Israeli novelist, has a little essay in his book on the Bible, and the Israeli satire program called Hayudim Ba'im, the Jews are coming. They have a remarkable set. We did this. I did this a couple of years ago before COVID. I showed their skits where they have Joseph. They actually think that they present Joseph as a gay character, and they make a very compelling case that Joseph is gay. I used that as a theme one year in the class, and not there are a lot of stereotypes here. When you teach the story of Joseph to kids who are 13 or 12, there's one online. There's one memoir of a teacher who's teaching it, in the current atmosphere, and the kids are going like, "Yeah, it's like obvious. It's obvious." Joseph he's completely concerned about his looks. He's a bit effeminate. He's always the rabbis certainly are teasing us with this theme that he's looking at himself in the mirror, is a bit narcissistic. He's coiling his hair all the time. He's putting on makeup, and there's a lot of gayness in the kind of stereotypical way that I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk this way anymore. But he is presented in some way as an ambiguously gay character. And the other side to that is that, there is a remarkable exceptionality to him because he's an organizer, he's capable, he's neat, and all of these things line up with certain gay stereotypes in modern culture. Okay, go ahead, Nanette. Unmute.
So going along with what John was saying, I just want to add that, Joseph, for all his talents and everything else, obviously he was the favorite child of Jacob. And, to me, Joseph didn't know how to keep his mouth shut. You don't go bragging to the brothers about, oh, I'm going to be a big macha, whatever. You kind of try to be low-keyed, but not Joseph. He had to open up his big mouth. And look what the brothers did.
Yes. Okay. So again, we are coming to the conclusion of the consequences of your choices, as well as the prodigious talent that he has, and it leaves us with that question: to what extent is he impossible, and to what extent does he himself transform himself over the experience. And Joseph, becomes, let's use the biggest literary arc here, which is that here he is in prison, and he is the most prodigious. And so, I'm going to jump ahead to next week, where he's hauled out of prison, and he's shaved down and dressed up and brought to Pharaoh, and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams successfully. And Pharaoh puts him in charge of the whole kingdom, basically. He makes him chief of staff. He makes him the principal of the whole kingdom. Pharaoh is Pharaoh, and Joseph is the executive director of the kingdom. No more person powerful than he. So the question then is, well, is he free? To what extent is he free? To what extent does he have autonomy? And I would argue that Joseph, in a way, becomes the first slave. That in all the trappings of power and privilege and responsibility, he lacks the one thing that he needs, which is freedom. And the Bible is not, I don't think that that's very subtle, because what's going to happen, as we get into the book of Exodus, is this is the central theme, the theme of how to be a free person. And Joseph, in wanting to be, wanting to aspire to this position of wealth and prestige and privilege, ends up becoming the first slave. There's a lovely biography of Benjamin Franklin called The First American. It's a remarkable biography in which, they talk about, Ben Franklin was born at the end of the 1600s. There was no America when Ben Franklin was born, but his character type was the first American, right? And I would use that idea as saying that Joseph, he was the first slave, the first Israelite slave. But Stanley, go ahead.
Well, so I can't resist the temptation to come back to Joseph's dreams.
Go ahead.
And the way in which he interprets dreams. And what tipped this off in my mind is what Nanette had said about God being with him. Because the way in which Joseph handles dreams is very different from the way we do it these days as psychologists. What do I mean by this? That there was the idea at one time that dreams were prophetic. That, if you could read the dream properly, you'd know what was going to happen in the future. We don't believe that because there's very little evidence for it. We think of dreams as being a wish fulfillment or problem solving or dealing with conflict, as we saw with Jacob and Esau and the angel. That one's much easier to understand. But Joseph's dreams, he is predicting the future. He is saying what's going to happen 3 days hence, in a very specific way. And the same with the dreams about the 7 lean years and the 7 fat years and so on. So, I don't know what to make of that, but one thing we can say is that, well, God gave him some very special powers that are not given to most people. It's not just that he used his smarts to interpret the dream, but he used them to predict what was going to happen, which, is not how dreams work.
It's not how dreams work in our contemporary psychological
yes
frame, obviously. And I think this is a great point. Dreams are a form of prophecy in the sense that they are signs. And I was dipping in and preparing for this. There is a literature of prisoner memoirs, and the memoirs of prisoners, dreams figure very, very deeply within prison memoirs. And I'm forgetting on where that idea first came to us. I'm not sure if it was a lecture or maybe somebody accounting, recalling their time in prison. And certainly, in the survivor literature, you can look at any memoir of survivors, and they will tell you that their dreams are what kept them alive on some level, because they dreamt of food, right? And they dreamt of freedom, and the dream was a form of escape. So on so many levels, the dreams function so powerfully within prison culture, all right, and literature in general, and the ability to create or to create an imaginative landscape. And of course, that's what the dream is. Well, the author of these stories is keyed into that. And I think what makes these stories delectable is that on the one hand, we have this idea of dream as prophetic. On the other hand, we have the idea that the dream is what feeds the imagination when you are not free. So all prisoners are going to dream, and all prisoners are going to talk about their dreams, and all prisoners, the scene where the prisoners wake up, they share a dream. I mean, we could look carefully at the way that the text frames it. They dream, the two of them. They're dreaming together, right? But they're both dreaming separately. And Joseph says, "Sapru nali," you tell them to me in the plural, tell them to me together, which you can't do. And the narrator knows that the dreams are similar because they have similar motifs. The idea of the motif of three branches of the geffen, of the vine, and three baskets on the head. And so the narrator already has done a very interesting piece of magic on us, which is that because the narrator knows everything, the narrator manipulates everything to our delight. And Joseph, in an instant, understands something about these prisoners. He understands them as a prisoner because he's been a prisoner, so he's experienced the depth of depression already, right? That there's a cycle that I'm sure every person who's ever incarcerated experiences, which is their first day in prison, which is the worst day of their lives, where they have to all of a sudden accommodate themselves and think of the rhythm and the way that they just can't relate to the world anymore. And that's a horribly depressing thing. And so here is the two prisoners. They've already had that first cycle of depression of where their freedom is, because it's after some days. Okay, but now he sees that they are panim zoafim, right? They're depressed, and he picks up on their depression because it means that they're no longer in the routine that they have accommodated to. They're back at a different point, and he's very intuitive and sees that, and that gives him, in addition to his privileged status in the prison, an entry point in them. And he says, tell me your dreams. And so they tell him the dreams, and I'm just gonna zoom ahead because we're running out of time. So they say the cupbearer says, well, you have I have the three branches, and I'm squeezing the grapes, and it's a time-lapse photography. I have time-lapse video of vines budding, but I'm not going to share that with you. I'm going to go back to the text and just go to the final problem, which is and of course the reason why they're in prison to begin with. I have to share that with you. One was, the rabbi said a fly was in the drink. Okay, this Rashi also makes this point. What was the chief cupbearer's sin? He let a fly fall into the drink, and the baking, a pebble was found in the delicate bread. What's the difference? The difference is the fly is something that you can't control, right? The fly is not, if a fly falls in the drink, it's really not your fault. But the pebble, that's a quality control issue, and a quality control issue speaks of lackadaisical and maybe malicious intent, and that's why the baker is executed. It's a phenomenal midrash. Really, it goes to the deep psychology of people's mistakes. Okay, and there's another explanation that they were after the king's daughter, which would be a big sin. Okay, let me go to the end here, which is when he says, sorry, he wants them to remember. He says, I'm highlighting, but keep me in mind with you. Ki im zchartani itcha kasher yitav lach vasita na imadi chased vizgartani al parovo tzitani min habayit. As I keep me in mind with you when it goes well for you. Pray deal in loyalty with me and call me to mind to Pharaoh, so that you have brought me out of this house. So he wants the chief butler, the wine steward, to remember him and to get him amnesty, okay? The baker's dream, he says nothing to him. He says, you're gonna die, you're gonna get, hung after 3 days. And look at, the last, in another 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up your head. Okay, verse 20. And thus it was on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a great drink fest for all his servants. He lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker amidst his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his cupbearership, so that he put the cup in Pharaoh's palm. For the chief baker he hanged, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. The chief cupbearer did not keep Joseph in mind, and he forgot him. So I want to stop here and say, like, this is amazing. It's such a great scene, because Pharaoh has a birthday. It's a simcha day, okay? It's a party. So there is this kind of tease going on here, which is, it's my birthday. I will exercise amnesty for my prisoners, okay? I will release my prisoners, especially these 2 prisoners who, let's face it, and I'm using the midrash here quite loosely. We don't know why, they're put in prison, but, I'm releasing them. I'm feeling benevolent, except at the party, he puts back the cupbearer, and you get the sense that as the cupbearer is back at his post, everybody's kind of sighing a sigh of relief, and they're clapping for him, they're cheering for him, or maybe they're cheering silent for him. They're going, yes, he's back, right? But then in the very next scene, they take the poor baker out and they hang him. And then the question then is, what's the response of all the servants? Very simple. I'll save you the effort the response is, our Pharaoh is a benevolent Pharaoh, except when he wants to kill you. So don't mess with Pharaoh. And that's precisely what a despot will do. A despot will make sure that everybody ingratiates themselves to him, because the despot will reward all the good behavior, and on a whim, with capriciousness, will punish those who he needs to punish. I don't know if you saw this a month ago, at the assembly of the Chinese diplomat, the Chinese assembly, whatever, where they have the whole assembly there, and there was one of the former leaders, Xi, who is the premier of China, turned to the people. They obviously, had this planned ahead of time. The guy doesn't know what's going on. They take him out. And so what's the message? The message to everybody is, don't mess with the premier here. And every despot does this. And they control the people that they control by rewarding them and by instilling fear in them. So now, in this environment, what do you think? You think that the chief cupbearer is going to go out on the limb for Joseph and get him amnesty? No way. Which is why this character is a throwaway character. I don't have a lot of positive things to say about him, especially next week. He is a completely slimy character that is only interested in himself. He will not do anything that will risk his own life. He's a pathetic character in the end. I wrote just a paragraph I'll share with Pharaoh makes a feast for all his servants, a kind of staff party. and two of his crucial staff are missing, the cupbearer and the baker. So he has them both brought out of jail as if to exonerate them both at a time. Look at the micro detail. Even to this moment, the baker may be thinking that he will get off. There's a party going on and we are back with the gang among our fellow servants. But then Pharaoh reinstates the cupbearer, perhaps with some kind of gesture, word, or ceremony, or pardon, with a kind of joyous reinstatement where he resumes giving Pharaoh his cup. But he has the baker hanged. So we get the message. The benevolent and compassionate Pharaoh is also the cruel and merciless despot. This places fear in everyone. The cupbearer has been entrusted with Joseph's story, but he has just experienced Pharaoh's pardon and witnessed Pharaoh's cruelty. Joseph is expendable if it means not irritating Pharaoh. Why does he forget Joseph? He is only interested in preserving himself. It would take an extraordinary righteous person to approach Pharaoh at this moment and plead for amnesty for a wrong foreigner. Better to forget him. In the moment of his reinstatement, he does not remember Joseph. We can forgive him for that. But following that, he actively forgets him because it is too much of a risk for him. He's a guy who's only interested in himself. The fact that Pharaoh reprieved him in the end boils down to capriciousness and luck. He's part of a system, and like all loyal bureaucrats will not bucket because he is only about self-preservation in the end, unlike heroic characters who will risk self-preservation for the advancement of others or for the advancement of an ideal like justice. In other words, he's a canard, the chief wine steward, and you know, there's nothing heroic about him at all. But he's a placeholder, and for that reason, he not only forgets in the excitement of the moment, or he doesn't remember. Below Zachar, he doesn't remember. Vayishkachehu, which has a little more force in it, he actively forgets it because it's not in his advantage to remember it. And that is where we have to end. I don't know if you have any comments. Go ahead, John.
In the story, in the description of Pharaoh, it reminds me of Stalin. No one knew where they stood with Stalin.
Yeah.
And how the composer Shostakovich was so worried. He wrote an opera and Stalin didn't like it. And he always had his toothbrush with him. He never knew when he was going to be taken.
There you go. It's a perfect example, you know, of how do you live under that circumstance, you know, and you think about it in terms of, you know, raw political despots, but you know, there are all sorts of micro tyrannies that people live with. You know, there are people who have tyrannical personalities, you know, within the microculture of, let's say, a family. And sometimes, you know, you don't know, you know, when you're going to incur the wrath of someone. I mean, you see this. Martin Scorsese deals, you know, in the film Goodfellas. There's a remarkable scene where he's crazy. The Nero character, what's in his character? The other character says, "You think I'm funny? You think I'm funny?" You know, and you don't know if he's being taken seriously or he's not, because he's the character on a dime can change his mind, shift from being, you know, funny or merciless, and that's psychopathic almost. Go ahead, Bob.
This is clearly not part of the plot, but if you were screening this and there was an offside where the cupbearer whispers to Joseph, "I'm not going to say anything to help you because only Hashem can do it for you." Would it happen?
The cupbearer, you know, that would make the cupbearer a little too pious for me, for my taste. He's a roguish character, you know. He's caught up in the world of the palace, and the word of the palace is, I have contact and proximity to wealth and power, and I want to play that game. It's the same game that anybody plays when they are next to celebrities. Today, our culture is so saturated with, you know, being next to celebrities, right? So, you know, celebrities come in different, you know, personality types. Some are quite benevolent and some are quite ruthless. And you want that proximity to them because it gives you power and prestige and maybe a certain degree of wealth also, and mystery. Oh my goodness, you work for so and so, but at the same time, you have to be able to withstand the tyranny of that, and that you could lose your job at any moment and be out on the street. I have recollections of certain individuals who employed, I guess, you know, for lack of a better term, servants or house stewards. They were docile and very, very, you know, companionable people, and they had to be that way because the person who employed them could be ruthless. And I always felt for them. And these were immigrants. They had no real prospect of going out on their own. So they were, in a sense, tied. They had to live in the same domicile. They had to be. They were given, I'm sure, very good living quarters and all sorts of benefits, but they had to be available on a moment's notice. And if they weren't, the threat of being fired was always hovering over them. That's a tyrannical regime to live under. And that's not a kingdom, that's a person's household, very, very difficult. And all of this is at play here. Which is why it's such a relatable story. Not that we all have servants and whatever, but we can all relate to the dynamics of self-interest versus altruism. And what does it mean? What kind of prices we pay for all the things that we need to accomplish? With that, we'll need to conclude, and thank you always. It's great to have this opportunity to share these stories.